Hey, I'm April with Mushroom Frog Co. Today we're going to be sewing the Kiwi Crossbody Sling. It's domestic and beginner friendly and requires no fusing or interfacing of any kind if you use the materials that call for in the pattern. In the video and pattern, I will show you my simplified material cutting techniques and the new binding technique I developed that's hassle-free and gives you crisp corners. It's a refreshing and quick little bag to make and is great for rejuvenating your sojo. The Kiwi Crossbody Sling can be worn 4 different ways as it includes all of the necessary strap connectors. As a shoulder bag, as a crossbody bag, as a sling bag, and if you make 2 straps it can be worn as a backpack. If you've already purchased the pattern, thank you so much. If not, the link is in the description. And be sure to join my Facebook pattern group, follow my Instagram, tag me or the Kiwi Crossbody Sling so I can see all your makes. Let's get to sewing. Here's the exterior and interior main body panels. I cut one of the interior pieces larger than it needs to be, just because it doesn't have to be precisely cut and it saves time. Here's the exterior and interior zipper panel pieces. I cut the interior zipper panel pieces larger than they need to be, again just to make it easier. The exterior and interior gusset panel pieces, jelly vinyl pieces, and front clear vinyl pocket panel piece. The interior slip pocket piece and the slip pocket overlay and my woven label. 2 Decoville heavy pieces, 2 number 5 nylon zipper tape pieces, grab handle webbing pieces and strap webbing. I'm only going to be making 1 strap for this bag to use as a shoulder bag, crossbody bag, and sling bag. But if you want to use it as a mini backpack, you can make 2 straps. My metal bag tag, zipper pulls, D-rings, lobster clasps, and strap slider. If you only use these D-rings, you can use the bag as a crossbody or shoulder bag. But if you add these 3 to the bag, you can use it as a backpack or sling bag. If you would like to leave off one of these sets of D-rings, that's perfectly fine. I will also be using these different sizes and strengths of double-sided tapes. If your machine can't handle double-sided tape, you can always use this double-sided tape made for quilt cotton and clothing, or you can just leave it out of your seam allowances. But I like to use double-sided tape for just about everything. Take your grab handle webbing pieces and start by using your lightweight double-sided tape, taking a longer piece than the width of the webbing, and laying down 2 strips on the right side where I tell you to in the pattern, so that when you flip it to the wrong side, these overhang, and you can use your strong double-sided tape and lay a strip down between these. I ask you to use double-sided tape here because we're going to be folding this over, and this needs to bend with the webbing, and it'll be used as your marker when you're stitching this closed, and you know exactly where to start and stop. Do this for both webbing pieces. Remove the paper backing off the long piece of double-sided tape. Bend the webbing over and begin clipping in place. Do this for both pieces. I have stitched down both webbings in between these marking double-sided tape pieces, backstitching really well at the start and stop, not going past these markers. You can remove the clips, remove the double-sided tapes, take both of your strap connector pieces, flip them to the wrong side, draw a center line down both pieces a long ways. I like to add a large piece of double-sided tape in the middle to keep the ends folded in, and also to act as a stabilizer because we're not doing any ironing in this project. Not that waterproof canvas really needs a stabilizer. I like to seam roll. Remove the paper backings. Fold in to meet the centers. Okay, I'm going to go to the machine. I'm going to sew 4 lines of stitching on each piece at 1/8 inch seam allowance, then come in again at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Same on this side, 1/8 and 1/4. Do the same on this one. And there's no need to backstitch here because we're going to be cutting these up. You can cut these where I tell you to in the pattern, clip your threads, and singe the edges. Add your D-rings and clip in place, or just take it straight to your machine and baste. Mark the centers of the top and bottom of your main body panel piece. Take your front zipper and your clear vinyl panel. Flip your vinyl panel right side down. You can decide which side you want up and down. This is my wrong side. Take a strong piece of double-sided tape and lay a strip on the long top edge on the wrong side. Remove the paper backing, flip it right side up, and lay it down according to where I tell you to in the pattern. Press the clear panel in place on the zipper tape. Bring out your 2 jelly pieces and flip them to be right side down. Take your smaller double-sided tape and lay 2 strips on each long edge of the jelly pieces on the wrong sides. Now take 1 jelly strip and remove both paper backings from the double-sided tapes, a little bit over, and lay the top edge of the jelly piece right on top of the top edge of that clear vinyl panel. Take this over to your machine and top stitch 1/8 inch from this long edge and 1/8 inch from this long edge on the jelly vinyl. Remove 1 of the double-sided tape paper backings from your remaining jelly strip. Press your remaining jelly strip on the other side of the zipper tape using the same distance away from the teeth you used on the bottom jelly strip. Bring over your front main body panel. Measure down where I tell you in the pattern. Remove this remaining double-sided tape paper backing strip and press into place. Make sure your main body panel is within the parameters of the jelly pieces and the clear vinyl. Now we're going to take it over to the machine and top stitch at 1/8 inch from the bottom and top long edges of the top jelly strip. Add your zipper pull now, and don't forget this step. Next, we're going to add your grab handles and bag tag if you have one. So go ahead and grab your grab handles and your 2 pieces of Decoville Heavy and your back exterior main body panel. Go ahead and find the top and bottom centers of your back exterior main body panel. And take your Decoville Heavy or whatever else you could be using for this part. I like to round the sharp corners off so that they don't try to poke through or be seen through the panels. You don't have to use Decoville Heavy or Decoville at all here. You can use anything that gives a little bit of structure and is not too thick for your bag, and it doesn't have to be fusible because there's no interfacing required for this bag if you use the materials I call for. Flip your Decoville Heavy pieces over so that the smooth and shiny side is face down and the rough side is face up. I like to use a little bit of wider double-sided tape here and just lay down 2 long strips on each piece. I just don't typically feel comfortable ironing vinyl. Okay, take your main body panels and flip them right sides down. Remove the paper backings of the Decoville Heavy's double-sided tape pieces and place them in place according to where I tell you in the pattern. Take your grab handle webbing pieces and a piece of double-sided tape that is shorter than the width of your webbing. The folded edge is down and the stitched edge is up. Bring this double-sided tape to the bottom raw edge. Do this on all 4. Then remove the paper backing and fold it up and stick in place according to the measurements I give in the pattern. Do this on all 4. We're going to come back in with smaller double-sided tape and lay down 2 pieces on the folded edge of where we just folded that webbing. Again, on the stitch side. Do this on all 4 ends. Next, we're going to grab your front panel. It's going to be the same on your back panel as well. Doesn't matter which one you do first, but you're going to take your webbing, fold it side up, stitch side face down. You're going to use the measurements I give you in the pattern for this, but you're going to pick one side, flip it over, remove the paper backings from the double-sided tape, and place it in place according to the measurements. Then we're going to take it to the machine and stitch a box with an X in the middle. Or you could use a rivet in the center. We've got one side stitched on. I like to back stitch at all the corners and in the X in the middle. You can pull your threads to the back if you would like. I don't always, but the Decoville Heavy is here to support your stitches with the vinyl. Now we're going to do the same on the other side. I like to use pattern weights just to hold things in place as I remove these paper backings and bend it over. Stick this down in place according to the measurements given in the pattern and stitch in place. Do this for the back panel as well. You want to make sure that your thread up here is a little bit past this folded raw edge that's inside, that's folded underneath here. Just so that the raw edge never really has a chance to fray out because it's encapsulated in this box here. This is what you should have. Now I'm going to add my bag tag. Now take your not precisely cut main panel interior piece and lay it right side down. And your front main panel piece and lay it wrong sides together, making sure that the entire front main panel piece is within the parameters of the interior piece. We cut this larger just because we're going to be trimming it down anyway, and you don't need to spend time cutting it precisely. I am going to go around and just cut a little bit off right here so that my clips can fit. And I like to clip the perimeter so that it's less likely to slide around as I'm basting it in place. And you definitely want your zipper pull to be within your main body panel piece. Okay, take it to your machine and baste around at 1/8 inch seam allowance according to this front main panel piece. We're going to be trimming this hang off in a minute. After you've basted at 1/8 inch around the perimeter, trim all the excess, not cutting into the main body panel piece. You're going to keep the same rectangular shape and dimensions. Next, we're going to take our interior slip pocket panel piece and its overlay piece, and a woven label and some double-sided tapes. And take the overlay piece and singe all the raw edges, the whole perimeter. On your overlay strip, on the wrong side, draw a long center line down the middle, double-sided tape, laying a strip along each long edge on the wrong side. I like to use a piece of lightweight double-sided tape to keep my woven label shut and to prevent any fraying that may happen, and lay it down with a heavier piece of double-sided tape. This interior slip pocket panel piece I cut it larger than it needs to be, and wherever you place your woven label, just make sure if your edges are slanted that it's not going to be within like where you're going to trim it off later, so this doesn't get cut off. And then remove the paper backings, the double-sided tape on your overlay piece, lay it down and lay this. I like to do it a little bit past my drawn line just to make sure that when I fold it over, everything's going to get caught in the seam. Fold it over, pressing into place. I like to use a couple clips here. Typically, I like to make the overlay piece longer than the panel piece, but it didn't work out that way this time. And you can see that there's more overhang of the overlay piece on the back side than the front, which is good because when you top stitch this at 1/8 inch from the raw edge, the back side will definitely get caught. You don't have to have that much overhang though. Just make sure both sides get caught when you top stitch. Next, take your precisely cut interior main body panel piece and the slip pocket panel you just made and lay them both right side up. And you're going to want to make sure that this top edge is lined up straight at the measurements I give you in the pattern. And then you're going to flip it over, clip in place, base the pocket on at 1/8 inch seam allowance. For this tutorial, I cut the slip pocket panel piece larger than it needs to be, but in the pattern I gave you the correct pattern pieces so that it will line up with the bottom edge of the interior main body panel. Now that we've basted this on, we're going to flip it over to the wrong side and trim off the slip pocket overhang. Do not cut in to the interior panel. Bring out your back main body panel and your 3 wider strap connectors and place a little piece of double-sided tape next to the raw edge on one side of each one. You're going to take one and place it centered on top, lining up with the raw edge of the main body panel. And the other two, you're going to use the measurements given in the pattern and place those on the sides, lining up with the raw edges. Clip all your D-rings into place. Take your interior slip pocket panel and place wrong sides together, lining up all the sides and edges, and clip around the perimeter. Flip it over and just make sure everything is going to get caught when you baste at 1/8 inch seam allowance around the perimeter. Backstitch over the strap connectors as well. I forgot to mention that you definitely want to be sure your slip pocket is oriented the correct way, with the handle facing up and the slip pocket this way. Okay, now that we've basted, if you have any little bit of overhang, you should trim that now. Your front and back panels are complete. We're going to set these aside and move on to the zipper panel. Taking your main body zipper tape, your interior and exterior zipper panel pieces, we're going to add a strip of double-sided tape on the top long edges of all 4 of these panel pieces. My interior zipper panel pieces are cut larger than they need to be. Just make sure that there's a straight edge to work with there. I forgot to do this at first, but now we're going to take all of these panels, fold them in half, and mark your centers. Just on the side where the tape is. I don't recommend cutting into your zipper tape, but you can draw a little line with a silver marking pen or an erasable pen, something, but keep it within the seam allowances. Okay. We're gonna work with one side of the zipper tape first. We're gonna match up the centers and line up the edge with the right sides together. Flip it over, and now using the interior piece, match up this center marking. I can barely see the center mark from this side overhanging or sticking out, so I'm going to meet those up. Even though the interior was cut larger, if you did not cut yours larger, then this is definitely important. I'm going to take your zipper sandwich over to the machine, and you're going to sew down this line at 1/4 inch seam allowance and back stitch at both ends. We've sewn at 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down, back stitching at both ends. Yours should look like this now. And we're going to take it over to the machine and tug these and top stitch at 1/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at both ends. We have top stitched 1/8 inch seam allowance, and we're going to repeat this on the other side of the zipper tape. So the interior pieces will be right sides together, and the exterior pieces will be right sides together. Finding that center cut on the opposite side. And take this over your sewing machine and stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance down the whole side, back stitching at the start and stop. This is what we have. We're going to open it up and top stitch this long edge at 1/8 inch seam allowance. This is what we have. Now we're going to attach our zipper pulls. We've added our zipper pulls. Now we're going to trim off the edges. Singe the edges of the zipper tape on both the zipper panel and your front main body panel. Now take your remaining 2 strap connectors and double-sided tape. Put a little piece on one of the raw edges on both connector pieces. Pick a side that you want to be towards the front panel of the bag and the back. You're going to attach these to the back and line them up to where the D-ring is not getting into the zipper tape territory, but close enough to be on top of your top stitching right there. And clip in place. You're going to do the same thing on the same side. And clip in place. Now go to your machine and baste these at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now that we have our strap connectors basted in place, take your exterior gusset panel piece and lay it right sides together with your exterior zipper panel piece and clip in place. Do this on both sides. Flip over and take your interior gusset panel piece. Line it up with the other side. And clip in place. Do the same thing on the other side. You should have your exteriors right side together, your interiors right sides together. Take this to the machine. I like to sew interior facing up and sew at 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and end and over the strap connectors. I sewed this side at 1/2 inch seam allowance, not stitching over this overhang of the zipper panel lining piece, but just where the other panels are. And then I did another row of stitching just 1/8 inch inside the seam allowance for extra security. Do this on both sides. Now I need to baste the entire gusset ring at 1/8 inch seam allowance. I like to pull the panels and clip them in place. I find this helps prevent the panels from shifting around and from being uneven anywhere. If you're comfortable just taking this straight to the machine, by all means. I do this with every gusset. This helps prevent it from getting warped or having excess material anywhere. Okay, now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and baste the entire ring on both sides at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Ignore this overhang here, we're going to trim it once we baste. Now we've basted the entire gusset ring. We're going to trim off the excess. I'm not cutting into the exterior at all. Now we're going to take this over to the machine and top stitch here at between 1/8 and 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides. We've top stitched. Now we're gonna turn right side out. Line up these where the connector centers meet. I like to put a clip. Now find the centers. Make a little snip. Our centers are marked. We can set that to the side and bring back our main body panels. Flip these over right side down. You're going to grab a ruler and come in on these corners on both panels. Measure in going this way on both top and bottom and make a mark the same length as the seam allowance. All the measurements are indicated in the written pattern. Now that you've made your marks as indicated in the pattern, we're going to flip these units right side up. Take your double-sided tape again. And lay a strip down the top and bottom long edges of the right side of the main body panels. I like to start with the front. Take your gusset ring and flip it wrong side out. Find your D-rings and make sure these are on top, because these are going to go on the back panel. So make sure that you can see your center markings. If not, you need to cut them a little deeper. We're going to remove this top piece of double-sided tape and align your centers right sides together. And make sure your zipper is on top. You don't want an upside down gusset. Now we're going to take this over to the machine and start and stop at the indicated seam allowance on these lines you drew. That's very important. Dropping your needle down on that line at your specified seam allowance. We're going to backstitch really well at the beginning and the end. We just sewed the top. Now we're gonna flip it around to remove the bottom edge double-sided tape paper backing. Match the bottoms up. Take it over to your machine and do the same thing on the bottom. Here we are sewing the bottom. You might have to scrunch your bag a little bit, which is fine. Make sure you're at the indicated seam allowance and drop your needle down on that line we drew. Backstitch really well. We've sewn the top and bottom edges. This is what it looks like. Now, you're going to lay it on your table with the gusset up. You're going to detach the gusset ring from the main panel's double-sided tape. You're going to get your scissors on the gusset only, not the front panel. I have pulled the front panel away. We're going to make a vertical cut going right up next to your last stitch right here. I'm going to do that on all four sides. Only cutting into the gusset. I'm gonna lay it sideways. You should have a nice little nearly 90-degree angle there. Now we're just gonna clip these sides together. And you have these corners exposed here. Do the same on the other side. Okay, now you're going to take this over to the machine and you're going to stitch at the seam allowance indicated in the pattern, starting and stopping where your stitches on top and bottom meet. we're gonna back stitch. So the other side, starting and stopping at the perpendicular stitches, back stitching well. All of our sides are sewn up. Now we're going to trim them down to about halfway. And now for this binding part, which is why I call for you to use non-fraying materials. You're gonna clip these corners right off. And now we're gonna go straight to binding. Here's your binding strips in 2 different sizes. We're going to divide them up because we're using both sides, 2 of each size for the front and for the back panel. I like to go ahead and singe the short edges of all the binding strips. You can do the same for the long edges, but we're going to be cutting one of the long edges down later. But feel free to do that. And now you're going to take one of the shorter binding strips. I like to have the majority of the overhang of the strip on the wrong side. We're going to be sewing, well, particularly if you have a flatbed machine, this side up. So this is the wrong side of the waterproof canvas. We're just folding it right over the raw edge. We're not going to be covering the corner here, the angled corner, and just clip in place. You alternatively could just use a continuous binding strip and cut it when you get to the corner here, because it doesn't always come out exactly perfect every time, but we are using non-fraying materials, so if yours is a little bit off, it's not really a big deal. But if it bothers you, it's not going to be seen, and you can scoot it over if you want. I'm going to leave it alone. And then you go to the next one with your longer binding strip and clip. But see, we have the larger side of the binding on the wrong side, so everything will definitely get caught. And plus, when the overhang is on this side, when you're at your machine, the weight of the foot will hopefully keep it from sliding around. Okay, we're gonna go to the machine. I like to start somewhere over here, not at the edge, but somewhere where the ends are both held down. You just start sewing, go down, pivot, pivot. You don't need to cut your threads or anything. You just all in one go. I like to come in close to these original stitches here. You might have to go back in again if you didn't get close enough. But the goal is to not go past these original stitches. So keep your eye out for that. You're going to back stitch at the ends of each binding strip. Pivot, flatten out the gusset piece that you're working on. Back stitch. Pivot. Back stitch. Back stitch. Give me a second there. The last one. This is what we have. I like to wait till the other side is bound on before I trim the excess. Okay, now for the back panel, we're going to unzip the main zipper. I find that helps a bit. Take your back main body panel and remove the top paper backing. Made up the centers again. Take this to your machine and do the same as you did for the front panel. This time you're really going to have to scrunch it under the machine, but it helps that we have unzipped the zipper panel. And the double-sided tape helps too. Okay, and remember to keep your seam allowance indicated in the pattern. Once you get your needle down, it's easy from there. Backstitch well. Now we're coming up on our first strap connector. Make sure that the hardware is out of the way. Okay. And I want to back stitch here. Back stitch well. We've sewn the top of the back panel to the gusset. Now we're gonna flip it around, remove the paper backing of the bottom, double-sided tape, meet the centers at the bottom again. This is where the double-sided tape is extremely useful, because because this is the most cramped section. Okay, once again, take it to your machine, crush it down if you have to. Now we have this. Once again, we're going to flip the gusset side up. The panel we just stitched is on the table. We're going to lift it up, peel the gusset away from the panel, only cutting on the gusset a vertical line going just right at this beginning stitch here. Same on this side. Pull it up on its side and start clipping in place. If you end up having a little bit of a difference, inconsistencies with how your corner looks, and maybe some slight overhang, or you cut it too close or too far, it will be covered in the generous seam allowance, so don't worry too much about it, but just try your best. Same thing on this side. Also, if you accidentally cut into your main panel instead of the gusset, which I have done a couple times, you can fix it, especially because the material is non-fraying. I just did a couple of back stitches to reconnect where I cut, and it's been fine. Okay, back to the machine. Start and stopping where your perpendicular stitches are. And back stitching really well. Coming up on another seam, strap connector here. Back stitch. Back stitch. Back stitching over the strap connector. Here we are. Flip it over. Trim down the seam allowances again. Cut off those corners. One thing I forgot to mention for the front panel is that it's a good idea to just run a lighter along the perimeter and hitting those strap connector raw edges. Like with the binding again, there's shorter strips on the top. Singeing all the short edges of these binding pieces as well. Tuck in those handles. And just clip just like we did for the front. Okay. Back to the machine. Starting about here, sewing pivot, back stitching at the beginning of an end of each binding strip. Make sure that your binding strips don't try to peek out through the side. And you have successfully bound the entire bag. Now we can go through and trim down the excess and make sure that everything was caught, your binding didn't slip too much. It's good to get right up next to your original seam just to help support the vinyl. We're going to go ahead and trim down the excess. Don't cut into your slip pocket though. Okay, so now your bag is complete. In order to turn it right side out, I highly recommend getting running a hair dryer or a heat gun in here for a little bit, a few seconds to warm up the clear vinyl and the rest of the material to make it more pliable and easy to turn out. If you don't do that and you have a stiff clear vinyl, turning it out without heating it up could cause it to kind of stab itself and have irreversible damage. I'm gonna go do that and I'll be right back. Your bag is complete. Now we're going to move on to the straps. For our 1.5 inch wide nylon crossbody, sling, and shoulder bag strap, we're going to singe the ends. That's especially important if you're using nylon. Take your slider, go up and over that bar. You don't need too much slack here. Enough to fold it over and stitch a couple of lines, or you can use rivets. So you just fold that here. I'm gonna go stitch a couple lines using black thread. I did 2 rows of stitching here. Now you're gonna keep it straight and flat. Add on your lobster clasp. thread it up. Feed it through over the bar again. So you should have this. Take the top. Fold it in. Give yourself enough space to sew a couple lines. If you would like to do backpack straps, you can do it the same way, just with 2 straps. And we did it! Tell me what you think. Let me know how you liked making this bag. And I'd really love to see what fabrics you chose. The possibilities with this one are truly endless. Tag me on Instagram, use the hashtag Kiwi Crossbody Sling, join my Facebook pattern group. We'd all love to see what you come up with. Thanks!